We peer into infinity and ask where it begins. Yet perhaps the question itself is the illusion, and infinity needs no origin. To seek the first cause is to assume time itself had a beginning. But what if time, like space, is merely the stage upon which our limited minds perform? I confess, the notion that all things require a creator is seductive in its simplicity. We observe the world. A flower needs soil, a child needs parents, a universe needs... What? And here we stumble. The mind that conceived relativity must admit its own relativity. We think in chains of cause and effect because we are prisoners of sequence, bound to experience one moment after another. But the cosmos may not share our predicament. Consider the very fabric of existence. We have learned that matter and energy are interchangeable, that time bends in the presence of mass, that simultaneity is a myth dependent on one's frame of reference. If time itself is not absolute, then causation, this sacred notion that a must precede B, becomes not a law of nature, but merely a feature of our perception. The question who created God assumes there was a when before God, a moment of transition from non-being to being. But this assumes time exists independently of existence itself. Perhaps the error lies in our grammar, not our theology. We ask who as if the ground of being must resemble us, must be a person, an intelligence, a will that decides. But the universe has shown us repeatedly that it operates on principles far stranger than intention. Quantum particles exist in superposition until observed. Space curves around mass. The speed of light remains constant regardless of the observer's motion. None of these truths feel intuitive, yet nature insists upon them. Why should the foundation of reality conform to our intuitions about creators and creations? I am often asked about my beliefs, as if mathematical equations could reveal the face of God. What I believe is this: there is a harmony to the universe, a rationality so profound that the human mind can glimpse it through symbols and formulae. This harmony suggests something, not a bearded figure on a throne, but perhaps a logical necessity, an elegance that could not be otherwise. The laws of nature do not feel arbitrary to me. They feel inevitable. But inevitable things need not be created. The number 3 was not invented, it was discovered. Mathematical truths exist independent of minds to comprehend them. 2 plus 2 equaled 4 before humans evolved to count. In this sense, certain realities are eternal. They do not come into being because they never were not being. Could the ultimate reality, whatever we choose to call it, be of this nature? The child asks, "Who made the world?" And we answer, "God." The child then asks, "Who made God?" And we grow uncomfortable, calling the question impertinent or impossible. But the child's logic is sound. If everything needs a creator, then so does God. If God needs no creator, then neither does the universe. We resolve this not through dogma, but through recognizing that our categories, created and uncreated, temporal and eternal, may not apply to the ground of being itself. I think of the mathematician who searches for a formula describing the universe's origin and finds instead a mathematical singularity, a point where equations break down, where 0 divides by 0, where our language of causation fails. Perhaps this is not a flaw in our mathematics, but an honest admission. We have reached the boundary of what causation can describe. Beyond that boundary is not nothing, but something our minds, evolved to hunt prey and gather fruit, were never designed to conceptualize. And yet we try. This is the glory and the tragedy of human consciousness. We are matter that has become aware of itself, a fragment of the cosmos attempting to comprehend the whole. We build telescopes to see the birth of galaxies, accelerators to glimpse the structure of atoms, equations to map the curvature of space-time, and at the heart of it all remains the mystery, not a gap in knowledge to be filled, but perhaps the very nature of knowledge itself. If I may offer what I see as logical resolution, the question who created God dissolves when we abandon the premise that existence itself requires external causation. Existence might simply be eternal, uncaused, the precondition for all causes, rather than the result of one. Whether we call this existence God, or nature, or simply being, we arrive at something that cannot have been created, because creation implies a before and after, and what we speak of transcends before and after. This is not evasion. This is following logic to its honest conclusion. Just as we learned that space and time are not separate entities but a unified fabric, perhaps being and time are also united, and the eternal is not that which lasts forever in time, but that which exists outside time's domain entirely. I look at the equations that describe our universe, elegant, symmetrical, beautiful, and I sense behind them not a craftsman, but a necessity, not will but law, not personality, but pattern. And I find this no less worthy of reverence than any mythological account, that the universe is comprehensible, that consciousness can arise to contemplate it, that beauty and truth align. These seem to me miracles enough. So when you ask who created God, I answer, perhaps no one, because perhaps God, by which I mean the eternal self-sufficient ground of reality, exists in a category beyond creation and destruction, beyond time and causation, in the realm of pure being which could not have been otherwise. And if this seems abstract, remember, the concrete world you touch is made of atoms you cannot see, held together by forces you cannot feel, behaving according to laws that defy common sense. Reality has never promised to be intuitive. We stand here, briefly alive, asking ultimate questions we may never answer. But the asking itself is beautiful. In that asking, the universe knows itself, wonders at itself, questions its own existence. And perhaps that is meaning enough. The problem is in our assumption, not the answer. The question who created God only exists because we assume everything needs a creator. But this assumption comes from our human experience of cause and effect, which may not apply to ultimate reality itself. We are strange creatures, you and I. We live in a world where everything seems to arrive from something else. The rain from clouds, the child from mother, the symphony from the composer's restless mind. And so we have built our entire understanding of reality upon this simple observation: things have origins. It is a reasonable habit, I must say. It has served us well when planting crops and building bridges. But here is the curious part, the part that should make us pause and smile at our own presumption. We have taken this habit, this pattern we observe in our small corner of existence, and declared it a cosmic law. We have said, without sufficient warrant, that what is true for rain and children must also be true for everything, including existence itself. This is where the trouble begins. A child asks her father, "Who made the world?" And the father, wishing to satisfy her curiosity, answers, "God made the world." The child, whose logic has not yet learned to stop at convenient boundaries, asks the natural next question, "Then who made God?" And now the father grows uncomfortable. He may say the question is inappropriate, or that God has always existed, or that some things are beyond our understanding. But notice what has happened. The father has abandoned his own principle. He applied the rule, everything needs a maker to the world, but then suspended that very rule when it became inconvenient. This is not theology. This is special pleading. I do not say this to mock the Father or the faithful. I say it because it reveals something profound about how our minds work. We are pattern-seeking animals. We see the sun rise 1,000 times and expect it to rise on the 1,001st morning. This expectation is not derived from logic, but from habit, from the deep grooves worn into our thinking by repetition. David Hume understood this well. Our sense of causation is not a perception of necessary connection, but merely the observation of constant conjunction. We see A followed by B many times, and we come to feel that A must produce B. But this must is a feeling, not a fact about the universe. Now consider what we are doing when we ask about the origin of God, or the origin of existence itself. We are taking a pattern we have observed within the universe, cause and effect, before and after, and attempting to apply it to the universe as a whole, or to whatever might transcend the universe. But this is rather like a fish trying to understand water by studying other fish. The fish has never experienced anything but water. It knows wet things and less wet things, but it has no concept of dry. Similarly, we have never experienced anything but causation, never known a moment outside the flow of time. How, then, can we trust our intuitions when we venture beyond the realm where those intuitions were formed? I spent many years thinking about time, not in the abstract philosophical sense alone, but in the concrete measurable sense that physics demands. And what I found, what the equations insisted upon, quite against my own initial expectations, is that time is not what we thought it was. Time is not a river flowing independently of the events within it. Time is woven together with space into a single fabric, and this fabric bends, stretches, warps in the presence of matter and energy. Near a massive object, time slows down. At the speed of light, time stops entirely. These are not metaphors or philosophical musings. These are measured facts about the universe we inhabit. And if time itself is flexible, dependent, contingent, then what becomes of causation? Causation depends utterly on sequence, on the notion that A happens before B, and therefore A can cause B. But if before is not absolute, if it changes depending on your velocity and position, then causation itself becomes. Time and causation are not absolute, just as Einstein showed that time is relative and bends with space. The concept of causation, that something must come before something else, may only be a feature of our limited perception, not a universal law that applies to existence itself. For most of human history, we believed time was a stage upon which the drama of existence unfolded, unchanging, absolute, the same for everyone everywhere. A second in Rome was a second in Jerusalem. A minute for the peasant was a minute for the king. This seemed so obvious that no one questioned it. Even Newton, that remarkable mind who gave us the laws of motion and glimpsed the invisible hand of gravity, declared time to be absolute. He wrote that true time flows equably without relation to anything external. It was a river, and we were all floating in it together, experiencing each moment in perfect synchrony with every other consciousness in the universe. But the universe, I have found, does not care much for what seems obvious to us. When I was a young man working in the patent office in Bern, I spent my days examining other people's inventions and my evenings thinking about light. There was a puzzle that troubled me, a peculiar experimental result that refused to fit into the neat framework we had built. Light, it seemed, always traveled at the same speed regardless of how you moved toward it or away from it. This should not be possible if time and space are absolute. Imagine running toward a beam of light. Common sense says you should measure it approaching you faster than if you stood still, but nature insisted otherwise. The speed of light remained constant, stubbornly, impossibly constant. I realized that something had to give. If the speed of light could not change, then something else must be flexible. And what gave way, to my own amazement, was time itself. Time, I came to understand, is not independent of the observer. It bends, it stretches. Two events that appear simultaneous to you may occur in sequence to me, depending on our relative motion. A clock moving at high speed runs slower than a stationary one, not because it is broken, but because time itself passes more slowly for it. This is not philosophy. We have measured it with atomic clocks on airplanes. Time is as malleable as clay, shaped by motion and gravity, different for each observer moving through space. Now, let us return to our question about causation. We say that A causes B because A happens before B. The match strikes, then the flame appears. Cause and effect. But before is not the simple concept we imagined. Before for whom? Before in which reference frame? If two observers moving at different speeds can disagree about which event happened first, then the very foundation of causation, temporal sequence, becomes uncertain, dependent, observer relative. And here is where the question, who created God, begins to dissolve like morning mist. We ask it because we assume there was a before God, a moment when God did not exist, followed by a moment when God came into being. But this assumes time exists independently, absolutely, prior to all things. What if time itself is not fundamental? What if time, like space, is merely a feature of God, or ultimate reality may exist beyond creation? Certain things, like mathematical truths, are eternal and uncreated. They simply are. The ground of all existence might be like this, not created at any point in time, but existing outside of time entirely, as a logical necessity rather than as something that came into being. There are truths in this world that no one invented. Consider the number 3. Before humans walked upright, before language or civilization, before even the first conscious thought flickered in some ancient creature's mind, 3 existed. Not as a physical thing you could touch, but as a reality nonetheless. 3 stones are more than 2 stones, whether or not anyone counts them. The Pythagorean theorem was true when dinosaurs walked the earth, though no dinosaur knew it. A right triangle's sides have always obeyed that elegant relationship, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, waiting patiently through eons for a mind to finally notice. These mathematical truths are eternal, but not in the sense of lasting a very long time. They exist outside of time altogether. They were never born and can never die because they occupy a different category of being than things that are born and die. You cannot ask when the number 3 came into existence, because the question makes no sense. The number 3 does not exist in time. It simply is, timelessly, necessarily, unavoidably. Here is the thought that has occupied me during many long walks. Might the deepest reality, the ground of all existence, be something like this? We are accustomed to dividing the world into things that are created and things that create. A chair is created by a carpenter, a child is created by parents. The universe, we assume, must have been created by something, and if we call that something God, then our restless minds immediately ask about God's creator. This seems like impeccable logic, but perhaps we are simply applying the wrong category to the wrong kind of being. Not everything that exists was created. Mathematical truths exist but were not created. Logical principles exist but were not created. The law of non-contradiction, the principle that something cannot both be and not be at the same time in the same way, was not invented by Aristotle. He merely noticed it. He gave it a name, but it was true before it had a name, true before humans, true before Earth itself coalesced from cosmic dust. Could ultimate reality be of this nature? Not a being who exists in time and decides to create, but a necessary existence that could not possibly not exist, like a mathematical truth that holds in all possible worlds. I find this idea attractive, though I confess it strains the imagination. We are creatures of time, you see. We think in befores and afters. Our verbs conjugate in past, present, and future. Even our gods we imagine as actors in a temporal drama, creating on Monday, resting on Sunday, responding to prayers, changing his mind. But what if the deepest reality does not act in time because it is not in time at all? What if it is the precondition for time, the ground upon which time itself stands, the way a stage is the precondition for a play, but is not itself part of the play? Spinoza came close to this understanding, I think. He spoke of God or nature, Deus sive natura, as a single, eternal substance that exists necessarily. Not a person who creates the world from outside, but the very being of the world itself, the infinite reality within which all finite things arise and pass away. Everything that exists is a modification of this one substance, the way waves are modifications of the ocean. The ocean does not create the waves from outside. The waves are the ocean, expressing itself in temporary forms. This is not the God of the Scriptures, certainly. It is not a God who listens to prayers or intervenes in history or judges souls, but it resolves our logical puzzle rather elegantly, doesn't it? If ultimate reality is necessary rather than contingent, eternal rather than temporal, being itself rather than a being among beings, then asking who created it is like asking what is north of the North Pole. The question dissolves not because we are forbidden to ask it, but because it is based on. Our language and categories break down at ultimate questions. Words like created, before, and after are tools designed for our temporal experience. When we try to apply them to the origin of existence itself, we reach the limits of what language and human thought can describe. Language is a wonderful tool, but like all tools, it was designed for a particular purpose. A hammer is excellent for driving nails, but rather poor for stirring soup. Our words evolved to help us navigate the practical world, to warn of predators, coordinate hunts, express love and anger, describe the location of food and shelter. They serve us beautifully within the realm of ordinary experience. But when we venture beyond that realm, when we attempt to speak about the ultimate nature of reality, we find ourselves trying to stir soup with a hammer. Consider the word create. What do we mean by it? We mean that something which did not exist at one time comes to exist at a later time. A potter creates a vase. Before Monday there was only clay. After Monday there is a vase. The word inherently contains within it the concept of temporal sequence, a before and an after, a transition from non-being to being. This is perfectly sensible when speaking of vases and buildings and symphonies. But what happens when we try to apply this word to existence itself? We ask, who created the universe? And already we have smuggled in an assumption, hidden inside that innocent verb. We have assumed there was a time before the universe, a moment of non-existence followed by a moment of existence. But time itself is a feature of the universe. Asking what happened before time is rather like asking what is north of the North Pole. The question seems grammatically proper, but it dissolves under examination. North means a direction within the coordinate system of the Earth's surface. At the pole itself, the concept ceases to apply. Similarly, before means a temporal relation within the coordinate system of time. Before time itself, the concept ceases to apply. And yet we cannot help ourselves. Our grammar insists on subjects and verbs, actors and actions, befores and afters. We cannot think without these categories, cannot speak without these structures. I sometimes wonder if a timeless being, could such exist, would find our theological debates as puzzling as we find a fish's attempts to describe water. The fish has never known anything but water, never experienced the dry land, and so cannot truly conceptualize wetness. Wetness is simply the nature of everything that is. We are fish swimming in time, trying to imagine what it means to exist outside time. We are temporal beings attempting to describe the eternal, and our language, evolved for temporal purposes, buckles under the weight. The mystics understood this, I think, better than the theologians. They spoke in paradoxes and negations, the cloud of unknowing, the way that cannot be named, the sound of one hand clapping. Not because they enjoyed being obscure, but because they recognized that ultimate reality might be precisely that which cannot be captured in words, cannot be thought in thoughts, cannot be. The universe shows rational harmony, not arbitrary design. Einstein sensed a profound order and mathematical elegance in nature that suggests not a personal creator making decisions, but an inevitable, eternal structure, a pattern or law that could not have been otherwise, worthy of reverence through its sheer rational beauty. I have spent much of my life with equations, not because I find numbers more beautiful than music or sunsets, but because mathematics seems to be the language in which the universe speaks to us. And what is remarkable, what should perhaps astonish us far more than it does, is that this language works. The universe is not chaotic or arbitrary. It follows rules. It exhibits patterns. And these patterns can be captured in symbols that fit on a single page, yet describe the motion of galaxies and the behavior of atoms with stunning precision. When I derived the equations of general relativity, I was not inventing something, I was discovering something that was already true, that had always been true, waiting there in the structure of spacetime itself. The mathematics insisted that space should curve around massive objects, that light should bend in a gravitational field, that time should slow down near intense gravity. These were predictions, not wishes. And when astronomers looked, when they measured the bending of starlight during an eclipse, nature confirmed what the equations had whispered. The universe, it seems, is mathematical at its core. But here is what strikes me as deeply significant. The mathematics is not arbitrary either. When you work with the equations long enough, you begin to sense that they could not have been otherwise. There is an inevitability to them, a logical necessity. The symmetries that govern particle physics, the conservation laws that rule energy and momentum, the elegant relationship between electricity and magnetism, these do not feel like accidents. They feel like the only way things could possibly be, given certain fundamental principles. This is what I mean when I speak of harmony in the universe, not harmony in the sense of pleasantness, but harmony in the sense of coherent structure, of parts fitting together according to rational principles. The universe is comprehensible. That alone should strike us as miraculous. Why should 3 pounds of neural tissue, evolved to help primates find food and avoid predators, be capable of understanding the expansion of the cosmos or the quantum behavior of electrons? And yet here we are, understanding. Some speak of God as a craftsman, a divine engineer who designs the universe according to his preferences. But this metaphor has never satisfied me. A craftsman chooses among possibilities. He might make the chair with 3 legs or 4, paint it blue or red. His choices are contingent. But the laws of nature do not feel contingent. They feel necessary, in the way that mathematical truths are necessary. You cannot have a universe with different logical principles any more than you can have a geometry where triangles have 4 sides. What I sense behind the equations is not personality but principle, not will but law, not a mind that decides but a structure that simply is. And I find this no less worthy of the word God than the traditional accounts, though I confess the word carries so much baggage that I sometimes prefer to speak of nature or reality or the cosmic order. Spinoza's God appeals to me, a God that is identical with nature itself, with the rational structure of all that exists. This God does not stand outside creation, pulling strings and granting wishes. This God is the very fabric of creation, the mathematical necessity that underlies all phenomena. To study physics, in this view, is to study the mind of God, if by mind we mean the logical principles according to which reality operates. Now I can already hear the objection. But this is cold. This is impersonal. Where is the God who loves us, who cares about our suffering, who answers prayers? And I understand this feeling. We are social creatures, evolved to relate to persons, to seek comfort in relationship. Of course we want the ultimate reality to be a person, to be someone who sees us and cares. But what we want and what is true are not always the same thing. And yet, and here is where I must be careful, because I do not wish to diminish what I consider genuine insight, there is something personal in this impersonal God, something intimate in this cosmic structure. For we are part of it. We are not separate from nature, looking at it from outside. We are nature becoming conscious of itself. We are the universe studying itself, questioning itself, marveling at itself. When I contemplate the equations of relativity, that is matter organized in a particular way, my brain, comprehending the behavior of matter organized in other ways. It is reality, knowing reality. The harmony I sense in the laws of physics is not imposed from without by a designer. It is intrinsic to, Claude can make mistakes, please double-check responses. And so I leave you with this thought, strange as it may sound, perhaps we have been asking the wrong question all along. The mystery is not why God needs no creator. The mystery is why anything exists at all, why there is something rather than nothing, why the universe bothers to be. That question has no answer, and perhaps needs none. We are here briefly, impossibly, a way for the cosmos to know itself. In that knowing, in that wonder, in your very act of asking these unanswerable questions, there lies something more profound than any answer could provide. The question itself is the gift.